Springfield, Missouri, June 7, 1992. Three women vanished from a one-story brick house on East Delmar Street between 2:15 in the morning and dawn. Their cars were in the driveway. Their purses, their money, their keys were inside. Their cigarettes were still on the coffee table. The morning paper was still on the front step. A small dog was frantic in the kitchen. The only sign anything had happened, a single shattered porch light. The glass was scattered across the concrete. By noon the next day, friends had swept it up. They thought they were helping. They were destroying the only physical evidence the police would ever have. Sherrill Levitt, 47, cosmetologist, single mother, Suzie Streeter, 19, her daughter. She had graduated from high school the day before. Stacy McCall, 18, Susie's friend. She was supposed to be somewhere else that night. Stacy had changed her plans at the last minute. That decision became the single most documented fact of her life. 3 women, no struggle, no blood, no bodies, 33 years, 5,000 tips, 7 persons of interest. 1 man who said he knew but refused to speak. 1 garage with 3 shapes beneath the floor. And the only thing the killer left behind was a broken porch light. June 6, 1992, Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock. Kickapoo High School graduation. Suzie Streeter walked across the stage. Her mother sat in the audience. After the ceremony, Sherrill drove home, and Suzie left for parties with her friends. Stacy McCall walked across the same stage. She received a Cocker Spaniel puppy as a graduation gift. She posed for photographs with her cake. She was wearing a small ring her boyfriend had given her. The ring would still be in her purse the next day. The school offered an alcohol-free lock-in inside the building until 8 in the morning. Suzie and Stacy declined. They went to graduation parties instead. The original plan was to spend the night at Janelle Kirby's house. Janelle was Suzie's friend. Stacy had brought an overnight bag, pajamas, toothbrush, clothes for Sunday. She would sleep at Janelle's, drive home in the morning, see her mother for lunch. That was the plan. Then the plan changed. By 2 in the morning, the girls decided Janelle's house was too crowded. Friends and family were filling every room. They left. They drove instead to Suzie's house, to Sherrill. 2 cars pulled into the driveway at 1717 East Delmar Street sometime around 2:15. Stacy left her overnight bag in the trunk. She would never go back to retrieve it. The Federal Bureau of Investigation would later log the disappearance window as 2:15 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., 5 hours and 15 minutes. Nobody knows what happened in any of them. 11:15 the night before, Sherrill Levitt was on her telephone. She was talking to a friend about painting a chest of drawers. They discussed colors. They discussed brushes. The call ended near midnight. Sherrill said she was going to bed. She did not mention that anyone was coming over. She did not know they were. Suzie and Stacy arrived more than 2 hours later. What happened in those 2 hours has never been explained. Sherrill's bed appeared slept in. Her bedside light was on. Her car was in the driveway. Her dog was inside. A co-worker of Suzie's named Nigel Kenny would later give investigators one observation. Suzie was a creature of habit. She always parked her car in the same spot in the carport. The morning after the disappearance, her car was parked somewhere else. Someone, Kenny believed, had been in her usual spot when she and Stacy arrived. Someone whose car had since been driven away. There are 2 timelines. In one, the abductor was already in the house when the girls' headlights pulled into the driveway. In the other, all 3 women were upstairs, asleep, and were taken in the pre-dawn hours by someone who broke through the porch light to test for a response. Police could never determine which was true. Both versions left no fingerprints, no blood, no signs of forced entry. The only physical disturbance was the porch light. The girl's overnight bag was still in the trunk of Stacy's car the next morning. She had not brought it inside. Either she planned to retrieve it later, or she never had the chance. What would make 3 women open the door for someone at 3 in the morning? The case has spent 33 years searching for an answer. Janelle Kirby drove to East Delmar Street at lunchtime on June 7th. Her boyfriend Mike Henson was with her. They were supposed to meet Suzie and Stacy. The plan was to drive to Whitewater Park together that afternoon. Janelle parked behind Stacy's car and walked to the front door. The porch light fixture was empty. The glass globe had shattered onto the concrete steps. She thought a storm had hit it. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house looked normal. The purses were untouched, cigarettes in an ashtray, a glass of water half finished. The television in Susie's room was on. Cinnamon, the Yorkshire Terrier, was in the kitchen. The dog was frantic. She had not been let out. She had not been fed. Sherrill never left the dog without food. Janelle called for Suzie. She walked through every room. She checked the bedrooms upstairs. The clothes Stacy had laid out for the next morning were folded on a chair. Her makeup bag was open on the dresser. There were no signs of struggle, no furniture overturned, no blood. Then the phone began to ring. Janelle answered. A male voice on the line made sexual remarks. She hung up. The phone rang again. She picked up. The same voice, the same remarks. She hung up. She remembered Suzie complaining about prank calls at the house in recent weeks. The voice on the line never identified itself. She never recognized it, and by the time anyone connected those calls to the disappearance, every recording in the house was already gone. This is where the case ends, not because the women were never found. They were never found. But because the answer to what happened to them was almost certainly inside that house when Janelle Kirby walked in. And by the time the police arrived, that answer had been thrown out, swept up, recorded over, and rinsed off the kitchen counter. The friends did not know they were standing in a crime scene. They thought the women had gone out and forgotten to lock up. Janelle and Mike spent more than an hour in the house. They moved through every room. They opened drawers. They sat on the couch. They petted the dog. Janelle was barefoot on the porch. Mike swept the broken glass into a dustpan so she would not cut her feet. He thought he was being helpful. By the time police were called, between 10 and 20 people had been inside the house. The phone kept ringing. Some of the calls were friends, some were not. The answering machine had a recording on it from earlier that night. A male voice. Friends listened to the message multiple times, trying to identify it. They could not. Then somebody pressed a button and the message was gone. Investigators would later say the deleted message may have been the most important piece of evidence in the case. It was gone. The porch glass was bagged. 3 sets of fingerprints had been smeared across every surface in the house. When detectives arrived, they walked into a contaminated scene. There was almost nothing left to read. 6 months later, on December the 31st, 1992, a man called the America's Most Wanted hotline with information about the case. The switchboard operator tried to connect him to Springfield investigators. The call disconnected. He never called back. In the weeks after the disappearance, Springfield police logged hundreds of witness reports. One vehicle appeared in 3 of them, a green van. The first sighting was on Sunshine Street around dawn. A motorist reported a green van weaving in and out of its lane. The driver appeared to be alone. The van made a U-turn near her vehicle and drove east. A second sighting came from a worker arriving at a job site that morning. He noted a green van parked along the curb. The rear windows were covered. A third sighting placed a man standing beside a green van in the same neighborhood. He was smoking. He was watching a house. The witnesses gave overlapping descriptions. They were certain. Police never identified the vehicle. They never identified the driver. In 2002, 10 years after the disappearance, 2 women contacted authorities about a concrete company in Webster County, Missouri. They said the men there drove a green van. The van resembled the one described in the original reports. Investigators went to the property. They dug. They found 2 pieces of evidence, a substance that appeared to be blood and a section of a green vehicle. The blood sample was sent to a specialized lab. The results came back inconclusive. The original van has never been seen again. There was another suspect. His name was Dustin Rayclaw. He had been Suzie Streeter's boyfriend until the spring of 1992. In April of that year, weeks before the disappearance, Rayclaw and several other young men were caught vandalizing a mausoleum in Springfield. They had pried open caskets. They had removed gold fillings from corpses. Suzie had given police a statement against him. He was awaiting trial when she vanished. Rayclaw had alibis for the night of June 7th. He has never been charged in connection with the disappearance. He has never been ruled out as a person of interest. The theory of retaliation has never been disproved. This is the section that breaks the case. In 2007, 15 years after the disappearance, a Springfield crime reporter named Kathy Baird received a tip. The tip described a parking garage at Cox South Hospital. The tipster said 3 bodies were buried beneath it. Baird looked into the timeline. The Cox South parking garage broke ground in September 1993, more than a year after the women disappeared. In June of 1992, the site was an open expanse of dirt. Anyone could have buried a body there. The structure that now sits on top would have been poured directly over the ground. Baird hired a mechanical engineer named Rick Norland. Norland brought a ground-penetrating radar unit. He scanned a corner of the lower level of the parking garage. He found 3 anomalies. The anomalies were roughly the same size. 2 of them lay parallel to each other. The third lay perpendicular. According to Norland, the configuration was consistent with what a grave site looks like on radar. 3 shapes beneath the floor, roughly the same size, buried in the year the women disappeared. Springfield police looked into the theory. They did not investigate further. The department spokesperson said the construction date proved the theory illogical, despite the lot having been accessible before the garage was built. She said excavation would be expensive. She said reconstruction would be more expensive still. She said there was no reasonable belief that the bodies could be located there. The department has never excavated. The cars park there every weekday. The lower level holds hundreds of spaces. The radar scan from 2007 has not been repeated. If the women are beneath that floor, they have been less than 2 miles from their families since the night they vanished. The shapes are still there. The radar found them once. Nobody has looked for them since. Robert Craig Cox is in a Texas prison. He is a former Army Ranger. In 1988, he was convicted of the 1978 murder of 19-year-old Sharon Zellers, a woman he abducted near Walt Disney World in Florida. He was sentenced to death. The following year, the Florida Supreme Court overturned the conviction on the grounds of insufficient evidence. He was free. By the spring of 1992, he had moved to Springfield, Missouri. He had been there only a few weeks when 3 women disappeared. He worked at a car dealership. By some accounts, he had worked alongside Stacy McCall's father. Police questioned him in 1992. His girlfriend at the time told investigators he had been with her at church on the morning of June 7th. His parents confirmed he had been at their home the night before. The alibi held. Years later, the girlfriend recanted. She said Cox had asked her to lie. She said she did not know where he had been that night. Her daughter, who lived in the household at the time, would later confirm that Cox had not been at church. In 1996, KY3 reporter Dennis Graves traveled to a Texas prison and interviewed Cox. The exchange was videotaped. Cox said, "I know they are dead. I'll say that. And I know that." He said, "That's not my theory. I just know that." He said the women had been murdered and buried in Springfield. He said their bodies would never be found. He refused to give any further details. He said he would speak only after his mother had died. By all public reporting, his mother is still alive. Cox sits in his cell. He has not retracted. He has not named a place. The condition he set has not been met. 3 women have been missing for 33 years. The man who said he knew has been silent for almost 30 of them. Janis McCall buried no one. For 33 years, she has lived in Springfield. She has kept the same listed phone number. She has said publicly that she keeps the line listed in case the women come home. In 2017, she gave an interview. She said she had stopped expecting her daughter to walk through the door. She said she had only one prayer left. She wanted to know where to bring flowers. In 2025, the families gathered at Phelps Grove Park to mark 33 years. The annual memorial has continued without interruption. Cinnamon, the Yorkshire Terrier, was taken in by a relative. Sherrill Levitt and Suzie Streeter were declared legally dead in 1997. The case files for all 3 women remain officially classified as missing persons. The house at 1717 East Delmar Street was sold in 1993. The new owners replaced the porch light fixture. They installed new hardware on the front door. They repainted the trim. A stranger lives there now. The address still appears on the case file. The lead detective rotates every 5 to 7 years. The current detective was a child when the women disappeared. The Springfield Police Department has logged more than 5,000 tips. Searches have been conducted in multiple Missouri counties, 40 acres of farmland, the bottom of Lake Springfield, the grounds of an abandoned property in Webster County. None of it has produced a body. None of it has produced a confirmed lead. The reward has never been claimed. Bart Streeter, Sherrill's son and Susie's brother, was investigated as a person of interest in the early years of the case and eventually eliminated as a suspect. He has lived with their absence for 33 years. Janelle Kirby, who first walked into the empty house, has rarely spoken publicly. The friends who swept the glass have not spoken at all. Return to the porch. The glass that shattered there on the night of June 7, 1992, was the only physical evidence the killer ever left behind. The friends swept it up. The dustpan went into a kitchen trash bag. The bag went into a curbside bin. The bin was emptied that Tuesday morning. The glass is in a Missouri landfill. It has been there for 33 years. Whoever broke the porch light made a choice. The light was 4 feet above the welcome mat, eye level with anyone standing at the door. To shatter it required reaching up and striking it deliberately. A man already inside the house had no reason to break it. A man outside the house broke it for one purpose. He was waiting to see who would come to the door. 3 women came to the door. They did not come back. The garage at Cox South Hospital is still in active commercial use. The radar scan from 2007 has not been repeated. The 3 shapes beneath the floor have not been examined. The man in Texas has not spoken. Stacy McCall's purse is in evidence storage in Greene County. Inside, it is the small ring her boyfriend gave her on the day she graduated. Nobody has worn it since. Suzie Streeter would have turned 52 this year. Sherrill Levitt would have turned 80. Stacy McCall would be 51. 3 women had been gone for hours, and their porch light was lying on the ground in 1,000 pieces. And somebody, somewhere in the world, knows exactly what happened to them. He has not said a word. If you enjoy dark mysteries and forbidden history, subscribe to the Black Archive.